Our guest today is Dustin Mathews. He has been responsible for filling 200 events a month, running several consecutive million-dollar product launches, and having mastered the art of getting butts in seats and eyes on webinars. Today he shares his powerful tips and secrets on how you too can conquer your fear of public speaking and give kick-butt presentations. Find out more at DustinMathews.com. Hi, Dustin. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. It's such a pleasure to have you here this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm actually really fired up today to share some insights and strategies.
Oh my gosh, and we're quite grateful for that because, as I said prior to the interview, that's one of the things that really scare people to death, and it probably more so than rats and snakes is the idea of getting up and speaking before people. It can be before a live audience giving a presentation, or just a sales presentation, or even picking up the phone sometime to do that cold call or talking to a new client. And all of this sets around the speaking realm and really being able to get your message out clearly. And it's so, so important. So I'm grateful to have you talk about that today. But before we go to all of that, share with our audience a little bit about your background, what brought you to helping entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I ought not be here today in front of you and in front of everyone listening in because I actually was afraid to do this and started off actually being in front of others. I actually found a legal loophole in college that actually got me out of having to take a class that everybody else had to take because I was so motivated by fear to get out of having to speak in front of others. And so along my journey, I was forced to speak and there was no getting out of it. There was no loophole. And so if I basically wanted to hold my job, I needed to cover for my boss. And so I delivered the presentation. And I got to share with you, like if you see a picture of me online, you may see a baby face, although I'm getting older, so it's disappearing. But imagine like 10 years ago, and if you still don't have the visual, I must have looked 16, and I was in front of people that were close to triple my age. And I said, no one is going to take me seriously. And so what happened is I delivered the presentation and people were on it. They wanted to know because I had this thing they wanted, which was specialized knowledge. And so in that moment, I realized, wow, the thing I've been running from my whole life is the thing that can really help me grow. It can help me scale, build authority, and many of the other benefits that I'm sure we'll get into today. And so that's been my passion, is helping others that may have that fear, and not just people with fear, but people that are out speaking as well that have a message to really amplify it.
Yeah, it's interesting how the thing, you're right. I found myself too, the thing you most run away from is sometimes the thing you need to face, and sometimes your greatest gift, which you might not realize until you tackle it. Why have you seen from your experience of working with people, why are we so scared of speaking? Now, I recall in college, like you, I tried to get out of a course where the last final exam was not written, but oral. And I was like, shoot me now. Just give me an app, please. But what have you seen from your experience? Are we so scared of speaking in public?
Well, I think a lot of people are fearful of speaking in public because of how they look, right? They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to wreck their brand. They just don't want to make a bad impression. And you know what I say? It's not just speaking that I think people have a fear with, especially in the business world, because I know that's who we're talking to.
Yes.
It's this idea of, if you sell somebody one-on-one, they can quietly tell you no. Or if you're on the phone and you make a pitch, they tell you no. But if you're like pitching in a room or you're selling an idea and there's 100, that's like 100 no's at once. And so I think people know that subconsciously and they're like, well, I'd rather like get the no in private. I think it's, the primal mechanism in us that protects us. But really in business, it doesn't protect us because we don't get that leverage if we get a yes or when we get yeses.
Wow, that's fascinating. I remember reading a book recently where a guy does sales presentation. He and his company were looking to invest and buy out another company. But it was the type of company where all the employees were partial owners. So he had not to convince like a boardroom of people, but the entire company that was worthy for them to get on board together. And he asked after his 15-minute presentation, all right, how many people here are on board with this going forward? And no one raised their hand. And it was like, whoa. Yeah. So I could totally get a picture of what you're talking about. Our worst nightmare ever.
That's exactly right. What's funny is, I talk a lot about presentations, but I have a marketing background, and that is one of my strong passions, speaking and marketing. And so a lot of people give credence or give thought to, like, okay, what I'm going to say. And you should, like, don't get me wrong there, but there's a lot of influence that can happen before and after. And so one of the concepts I talk about is choreography. When you go see a ballet or you see a play, you think about the entertainers that practice and practice and practice, everything. And even the team, the ushers, they clean, the lighting technicians. And so it's this big performance. And so most speakers or most people that give a presentation, they focus on a message. And just like that story you described, there could have been some stuff that person had done before the fact to build relationships or build influence with all those shareholders or all those employees of the company, in addition to delivering a great message. And then, of course, you always want to have solid follow-up.
And that's important, because he said the one thing he got out of it afterward, because he went deeper and started asking questions. And that's the main thing we hear in sales and marketing that is missing from a lot of people, just asking the questions of the people you're talking to, whether it be sales or, a business presentation, is really asking them their point of view. What do they need? What are their wants? And he found that the audience, when asked, found that his speech or his presentation lacked this connection to them. Like, it wasn't about them. They did not matter in this process, and that's what bothered them. And so how do you really build that assurance and establishing trust when you're in a business meeting or before 100 people in a big business hall talking about some, marketing presentation or just new product you have?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I call it the pregame. And actually that idea just popped into my head. And what I mean by that, I actually call it something else, but pregame fits right now. It's what's communicating to me. And so what I mean by that is, so if you are going to go into a board meeting, giving a presentation there, you want to do your research. So that before you play the game, you want to figure out who the players are. You want to go on LinkedIn, you want to use resources, you want to ask around and get some intel. Now, when you go and speak at a large event, you can leverage all these cool, fanciful tools that we have now in social media. And so most event promoters and organizers, they'll have a hashtag or they'll have a special page where you can actually start to ask questions and you can start to engage. And that's one of my favorite strategies, is to do that work ahead of time so that you can make it feel special to them, so that you can make it feel like you're talking directly to them and bringing the most value versus some canned presentation.
Yeah. And I found for myself, I think one thing that really bugs me when I see presentations that just make me want to yawn and fall asleep is that they kind of come in with everything pre-rehearsed, and it sounds so rehearsed. It almost sounds like they're reading off a script. And I think it's really to keep their nerves at bay because they're so nervous. But sometimes I'll write a whole bunch of stuff on this PowerPoint presentation. I'm like, I can read myself. If you just want to send me home with a little brochure, I can read that stuff. But how do you get to the point where you're so comfortable where it's really like connecting like a big audience, a big conversation with everyone out there, instead of feeling like you're just reading to them? How do you get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. I mean, I suspect that everyone wants the magic bullet answer. Heck, I always look for the, like, what's the one thing and what's the one thing that requires, like, no work. And so the true answer is really practice and owning it. So what I mean by that is, if you know your message and you own it, and let's say you actually don't, you're not there yet, so I don't want to make an assumption, you don't own it. Well, you got to go out and you got to practice. And so whether you're doing it in your apartment, whether you're doing it in your office, I prefer that you do it in front of others, your peers, or you go speak in one-on-one with a colleague and start to practice it. Because when you know the message in your head, then it's now all about delivery. And so you're not necessarily worried about what is the words that you're saying, but are you getting off and touching? Are you asking questions? Are you really connecting and making eye contact? And so really, to own it and make it feel like a conversation, like you've given it for the first time, you've got to own your material. You've got to know what you're going to say. And the challenge with this is most people roll to an event or a big board meeting and they stay up till 3 a.m. They put crazy pressure on themselves and they're in their head and they're in a place of fear, really. And so it does come off like you described, where, oh, it's canned or there's nervousness. And so really, I want to say this is, how many opportunities do you have to give a presentation, whether you're a speaker or you're going to step into a boardroom? And if you think about that in your life, it's not really many. And so you really ought to play the game at the highest level. You ought to choreograph, you ought to rehearse, you got to, practice, because this is one opportunity or many opportunities for you that can make a difference in your world.
Wow, that is so insightful. I recall my very first marketing event, Savvy Through, oh my gosh, 4 years ago now. We invited a number of marketing guests to come out for one day in Manhattan. It was about 15 of them, and to do a presentation. Man, was that a really hectic and difficult event to put on. But I was surprised at how many folks appeared to me to be unprepared for the event. And it left me a little frustrated. And I know these people care about their business. And is the not preparing part of the fear that, hey, if I don't prepare and I just show up, it'll just work out? Or are they even scared to even practice? What comes behind that? What are some of the thought processes you believe?
Well, I think you're right. I think fear is a big part of it, but I actually feel that people don't recognize the opportunity. So for those that have never put on an event or don't have that event sort of knowledge or background, think about this. Whenever someone puts on an event, there's a lot of man hours, woman hours that go into it, and there's a lot of money. And so if you think about it as if it were your own money, then the game changes. So to, communicate the message and do Facebook ads and the people that do direct mail to fill their events or, run video retargeting and all that. If you think about it, I mean, most people will spend, on a very small event, they will spend $5,000, and that'll be marketing, that'll be staff and personnel, that'll be the venue space. And so if you think about it as if it were your own $5,000, then you start to treat it a little differently. And so I think the challenge is most people get these opportunities and they're like, oh, this is sort of free. I just show up and do it. And so if you treat it as if it's your own money, and some of these opportunities, these people pay $1 million to put on the event. And so think about what would you pay if someone charged you to be in front of those people, in front of this audience? That'd be a lot more. And so I just think people don't understand that.
That is a very good point, to put in that perspective that, hey, if this is your money you're putting on the table to make this happen, would you show up the same way you did at an event that's free? And I actually heard that from people that actually ended up coming, oh, well, I just get up there and get to talk and whatever, I just show up and then leave. But I'm thinking to myself, this is you might be meeting people in that audience who've never met you. They don't know anything about your product, service, or information or your business. And this is the first time they're connecting with you. That first time, that kind of getting to know first time basis, you're making an instant kind of impression of what they're going to think about you and your business. And that could go on for years. And who knows who they talk to? Oh, I saw XYZ from business. That business is they'll get an immediate impression of whether I ever want to do business and then tell all their friends about it. So it can really affect you in the long term, not just the people in that room, but when they carry that message forth to everyone they know.
Absolutely. Like, you give me pain in my heart. And the reason why is you made me feel the pain. And this is like, in a good way. Like, I want people to feel this too. I want to transfer this. Because, like, let's say I do realize there are people on here that, aren't necessarily like they're going to go out and do public speaking, but they may go raise money. And so if you get an opportunity to talk about your business in a public setting, you never know what investors in that room. You never know if you are a speaker, maybe there's somebody else that runs, an Inc. conference or an entrepreneur or a big, high level conference. And so, like, if you think about that, you never know who's in that audience, and your next, 6-figure client, your next 7-figure deal could be in that audience. And so if you just kind of show up unrehearsed and you just say, oh, I'm going to wing it, you're going to get whatever you get. But if you think about, wow, there could be that in there. And that's the beautiful part about this is you can win multiple ways. You could get invited to another speaking gig. You could have clients in the audience. You could have investors that want to take you public or invest in your business. And so there's a lot of different scenarios that people don't think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the speaking doesn't just play on a personal level where you're doing a big speaking event. It can be, there's one gal who came on my show who's a business coach and helps people with speaking coaching and such. She said it's just picking up the phone sometimes is giving your message. And a number of years ago when I first started this show, I went to a networking event that had to do with aviation. I love aviation, and we were talking airplanes. That's it. And someone got to talking and said, hey, you're doing this podcast. Tell me more about it. It's a business podcast. And I told them, but from that conversation, this is 2 months out of the can, I got a whole bunch of great guests, one of them being a top celebrity at the time who was kind of forwarded to us based on me being able to tell people about what I did. So, I mean, this doesn't just affect you on a stage presentation you give, but in all parts of your business. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, big time. And, you see the proliferation of media now. So Facebook Live, right? VR's coming, like all this visual media is coming out. And so now more so than ever, the business owner whether they're the spokesperson or have someone on their team that speaks for them, depending on what level of business you're at, you now more than ever in the spotlight. The spotlight is on. And so are you able to have a presence? Are you able to get people, motivated about your business? And finally, the big thing that, I believe that I want folks to hear is giving people a message that gets people into action. So I want to make a clear distinction. Mm-hmm. I'm not advocating being motivational and rah and inspiring the troops. I'm talking about how do you deliver a message that gets your prospects, that gets your employees, that get people into action? Because without action, really nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your book mentioned also how entrepreneurs can use leverage their presentations they do online and offline, because we're not just talking about live presentations you do before an audience of 1,000 or 20,000, but you can use the leverage of online, either social media. I've seen a lot of coaches and such use Facebook Live, but even in the way of doing online teleseminars. Share a little bit about how to use those mechanisms or ways to build leverage for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the old school, and I love new school too. I love all the cool tech that's coming out and all the things that we can do, but I really love combining them. And so as a strategy, I was just interviewing Jeff Ronig, the founder of Stealth Seminar. He's got an automated webinar platform. So it's this idea that you can take a presentation, record it that's successful, and then just play it over and over again online or on the iPhone. And so here's where this gets fun and interesting. He's saying now bricks and sticks or retail shops are now finally kind of getting into the rage of webinars. In the coaching and author and speaking world, we've kind of been doing webinars, in the corporate space kind of doing webinars for a bit. And so I said, well, what about this idea of sending postcards? What about this idea of sending your customers an invitation to join you online? And so he said, yeah, that's great, because you're taking your existing customer base, you're touching them with direct mail, not an email. And so you're getting their attention there, and you drive them online. And the beautiful part is you show them a presentation, and with everything we can do now, we can actually retarget. And so any business owner can leverage the power of a presentation, whether it's online, it's one-to-one, Facebook Live. And I also want folks to think that everything in life is a presentation. And I can go further if we've got time.
Yeah, that's true. It is. As we talked about, as one gal said last year or the year before we came on our show, is that picking up the phone is putting yourself out there, putting your business out there. You don't want to just pick up the phone, leave a voicemail on a business line somewhere, a prospect of such, and it's shabby and it's not clear, because that also reflects on your business, no matter what it is. Even being at the grocery store and someone says, what do you do? And you talk about your business, you've got to be able to really shine and be clear and concise and really draw people into. Now, you mentioned earlier on, we talked a little bit about building that establishment and trust. As you go out into the world, your image, the way you present yourself, not just your speaking, is also a way to build trust, correct?
That's right. It's this idea of like, what can you do to influence? So as a strategy, if let's say you're at a business networking event, I want to take this off the stage. So you're at a business networking event, you're trying to do business there. And so this idea of everything is a presentation, like how does that apply? I'm not showing people slides at a networking event. So like, how can I use this, Dustin? So what I say is one of the strategies of influence and that we teach in the book is have someone introduce you. And so, if you think about it, the president, whether you like them or not, or any president, pick your pick, they're never just like, they never get up there and do the press conference. There's always one or two people ahead of them that like introduce them. The Queen is always presented and royalty is always presented. Your favorite rock band, your favorite, concert, there's never just the performance. There's always a warm-up act. So if you think about it, in society, the most, highly regarded people, entertainers, the people that get paid the most, they're introduced. And so this idea of influence would be like, if you're at a business networking event, obviously for an introvert like I was, and still am to a degree, you want to have someone introduce you. And so how I translate that to the stage to bring it full circle is you would want to have someone introduce you. And that's even before they hear you speak. And so subconsciously it says, wow, this person's, somewhat important.
Well, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought of that, but a number of years ago, we were holding a number of events in Manhattan that were, speaking events where our past guests can get up and speak. And one guy who I know very well, he's an MC, he's been an MC, he's actually sang opera, been in theater. He said, well, I think you should have someone else besides yourself, because you're the one running it, actually presenting all of the guests to make it that more impactful. And it really was. It was because he's a really good comedian, so he was able able to, give a little bit of humor before every guest. And it was tremendous. And I never thought about the power of doing something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because these clues are all around us. If you look in society, we've created this concept called presentaining. And it's this idea, whether you like it or not, in society, teachers get paid a certain salary and entertainers get paid a certain salary. And so obviously entertainers make the most. And so, if you're a business owner, if you're somebody that's, teaching like a coach, the more you teach, the adage is the less you sell. So you want to give value. I want to make a distinction here. You want to give value to your audience, but you also want to entertain them too. If you desire to get results, if you desire to build an influence or build authority or build, your audience. And so always keep that in mind, to be entertaining your audience while delivering value.
Wow. And so I'm wondering here, because one thing I've heard from a lot of entrepreneurs off air is that, hey, I've done online presentations, teleseminars, webinars, and I can't seem to get people engaged. And also, how do I find a good time spot? Everyone's telling me they're busy, busy, busy. If you're, say, you've never done this before, you're getting started, you want to do a teleseminar or webinar online, how do you get started to, for one, kind of build that audience and get people engaged if they want to come on for a half hour, an hour? What have you found works?
Well, number one, like if you're just getting started, no list or, minimal list or minimal Facebook following, the things that I've done, whether it was at the first company where we did Inc. 500, and then the second company where I had to reinvent myself, essentially leaving and starting from scratch, I've always done it on the backs of joint ventures. And so let me explain that, where joint ventures are potentially people out there already that have your audience. So they could have a Facebook fan page. It could be an association that has all your audience already. It may be an online marketer or business coach that has has an email list. And so I always look for who are the influencers and how can I build value? Mm-hmm. And so the ways to build value is, one, you can pay them. Right out the gate, people are open to that, like a paid placement, like you see on TV, or you can cut them in on the deal and say, hey, listen, let's do a webinar together and I'll give you a percentage of the profits out of the end of it. Or if I'm really, really starting off and I have no budget, I just get real with them and I do research on them. I do more work. I invest more time because I don't have the money in this scenario. Mm-hmm. And I figure out, how can I build value? Can I volunteer? Can I show them a trick that I know? Can I introduce them to a celebrity that would make their event or make their world different? And so when you build that relationship, a lot of times people will reciprocate for free if they're of the right mindset. Mm. And so just getting started, those are my favorite ways. And then your second question was about how do you get them to show up? Was that right?
Yes.
Well, the poll is great. So surveying obviously to figure out what the best times are, but it all comes down to value. There's so many things we can learn in this world, but it's always about delivering value to people. And so number one is you want to be thinking about what is the thing that's going to get people excited. And obviously if you survey them, you can deliver it back to them. And then don't just make it about the event itself. Like, it is important to think about what's the hook of the event, but also too, what are some tools and resources? No one just wants to learn information anymore. They want shortcuts. They want checklists. They want things when they arrive that are going to make their life easier. So if you can tease that, dangle that out there, that will increase your show up ratio.
I love that you mentioned this, mentioning the fact that, hey, you're new, you're getting started, you don't have much of a list, and you want to figure out how to get started, and you're using the platform of others, joint venture or such, but realizing as well that you have to come to the table to offer something. And this is funny. I think I heard an entrepreneur years ago. He's a speaker of some sort. I forgot his name, but he had mentioned the fact that, and I think he makes millions, but he had said what drove him crazy is people say, can I take you for a cup of coffee and pick your brain? He's like, I make millions, so no. So he's like, but people don't understand. My time is worth more than a $5 cup of coffee. So I like the fact that you mentioned coming to the table with some strategy that they can really, enhance their audience or a celebrity, something that is of value to them, and not just walking in and saying, you should give this to me. Because actually, I said this once on my show, when I first got started, there was a woman in my industry in finance who is kicking the bucket. She's a woman entrepreneur, created a multi-million-dollar company. And I asked her just that on Twitter. We became kind of friendly and we were talking back and forth. And I said, can I pick your brain on how to build this business? And she said, yes, here's my prices per hour. And I fell over and I thought, well, gee, what's wrong with her? She's a woman, I'm a woman. She should want to help me. And then now I think years later, I said, no, I mean, in fact, I did pay her because I felt she was that valuable, but it bothered me at first and it shouldn't. And that's what I think people should understand is that they've built how many years? It's 20 years she's in business. Look at the back-breaking blood, sweat, tears that, sacrifices she went through to build that business, and you want to get a piece of that knowledge. How much is that worth? I mean, you go to college and you pay for it, so why wouldn't you pay to get, to get on someone's stage or to get some information or learn or grow your business?
Absolutely. I'm with you. And I also too, I do look for the opportunities to build value. So like, if I recognize like you're an influencer, it changes a little bit because I understand like you want to build value, you want to connect with people. So like, if I'm going into a business meeting and I'm real clear about, this is all about research and knowing who's there and doing your due diligence, the pregame. And so if I know who's there, obviously I'm not going to try to charge an influencer or somebody that I think can add value to my community or to my message. And so that's my only caveat to what you said. I completely agree. People should be paid what they're worth. Be careful about people that suck your time, but also to just make sure you know who you're in front of, as much as possible.
Oh, that's true. Absolutely. Because, someone's out there and they've built a business over 20 years and they are a $20 million company. You're going to say, hey, you to get on my stage, it's going to cost you $1,000. It's like, excuse me, I can get an NBC, a Fox, or whatever. I don't need to pay you. So, you're completely right. But I love the fact that when you realize that whoever you're talking to, realize what value they have. And if you come to the table, add value, as you keep saying, it's the most important thing. And it's been such a fascinating talk chatting with you today, Dustin. I don't want us to leave without everyone finding out how they can work with you. Get your awesome book, No BS Guide to Powerful Presentations, the ultimate no-holds-barred plan to selling everything with webinars, online media speeches, and seminars. Share that with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you big time. Well, I made it real easy. We put up a site at nobspresentations.com. So if you like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, go there. It'll point you in that direction. And the reason why I tell you to go to that site is because it's not just a book that will change your life, change your business life, but I also give you tools and resources along with it. So there are special downloads on that page to make putting your next message together, your next presentation together a whole lot easier, simpler, and quicker.
That's awesome. Well, again, I just want to thank you, Dustin. I know this is going to help a lot of fearful speakers out there or possible, getting in the speaking realm or just getting out there and presenting their product, service, or information in a better way. Your book is going to help them. And I know that your valuable information has helped them today. Thank you so much, Dustin, for coming to Savvy Business Radio.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I had a blast.
Me too. Have you ever dreamt of having a podcast made about your family, about someone you love, or an amazing figure whose story must be preserved for future generations? Now you can do just that with Family Sounds. Our team of podcasting producers use personal and oral history to create high-quality audio documentaries about families and real-life heroes. We will transform your history into a meaningful story that can be shared and enjoyed for years to come. To learn more about Family Sounds and to receive your special discount, visit en.familysounds.net/podcast and enter promo code SAVVY. That is en.familysounds.net/podcast and enter SAVVY.